All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. It's 1 minute past, so we'll go ahead and get started here. Hopefully, everybody is looking forward to today's live tour. Again, going to start off here just with who I am and then go from there. So, my name is Randy Shore. I run our delivery and support team here at Kion. So, myself and my team help customers get up and running, make sure that you're finding success with the platform, and ultimately that we're solving, some of the technical challenges that you're looking at Kion to solve. So please feel free to ask any questions throughout today's presentation. Just a brief agenda overview. So first, we're just going to go into what is Kion. So for some of the folks out there, I'm sure this might be the first time you've heard about Kion. Again, thank you for taking some time out of your day to listen to what we have to say. We're going to focus the majority of our time in a live demonstration here, ensuring that we're not spending our whole time in PowerPoint. Leave time for any questions that folks may ask. Please use the Zoom Q&A feature. I'll be monitoring that as we go here, and we'll make sure that can use that time later, as well as during the demonstration. If you want me to go down a specific path, I'm happy to do so, and then talk about any next steps that you might be interested with Kion. So just to get things started, quick poll question, really understand what you're hoping to get out of today's demonstration. So let me give folks maybe 30 seconds or so just to hopefully give a short answer of what you're hoping to get out of today. Great. I see some answers rolling in here. All right. So it looks like most people are just looking for sort of the overall platform overview, just an understanding of what Kion is. Happy to do that. So thank you for answering that poll here. I am going to go ahead and end that for us. So appreciate that. So let's, without further ado, sort of jump into, what is Kion? So Kion is a software platform. We are designed really around three core areas. So automation orchestration within the cloud, financial management, and continuous compliance. We are really focused around this idea of both visibility and control in all of these different areas. And that's where we're going to focus today's demonstration. We do support AWS, Azure, and GovCloud. So we are designed to be either a multi-cloud solution or potentially if you've got, say, multiple different organizations or tenants or payers or whatever it may be within one cloud provider. It's really, again, designed to give you that control across the enterprise or across orgs at scale. So some of the differentiators of our platform, again, is that ability to not just say report on spend with our financial management piece, but really combine the functionalities or combine the pillars. So moving some of our automation workflows into financial management so that we can actually enforce things like a spend runaway, for example, or enforce some of these compliance frameworks, which we're going to dig into as well. In addition to that, Kion is actually self-hosted, so we install inside of your environment, which really helps if you're meeting a particular compliance framework or just have sensitive data that you want to ensure doesn't leave sort of the perimeter of your organization. Kion fits really nicely into that model, especially in those regulated industries. We're also really focused around giving, again, visibility and control at all layers of your organization, whether that's your executive user that just wants to see sort of reports and understand what's going on, all the way down to your actual developers that are looking to get native access to the cloud consoles, all while being able to enforce and govern, what access they have and what they can do, and how to enforce some least privilege on that as well. And we'll spend some time there in today's demonstration. So without further ado, again, I want to make sure that the live demo series is all about the live demo and not just the presentation in PowerPoint. So let me flip over to that here, and we can go ahead and jump in. All right. So again, please feel free to use the Q&A pod in Zoom here as we go. I will, like the poll asked for and folks answered, focus on an overall demo, but would happy to be digging in wherever you'd like as well. So right here in our demo environment, we can see, again, from a visibility perspective, information across all of those different areas that I mentioned at quick glance, from how I'm spending across my organization, what my compliance looks like, quick and easy ways to grab access keys or federate into the cloud providers. But really where things begin in Kion is this concept of an organizational chart or an org chart. This is what allows us to handle all of those different areas, from how we're going to set policy throughout the organization, how spend is rolled up and managed throughout the organization, how it's budgeted, as well as, again, that compliance score, that understanding of what your compliance posture looks like broken down in whatever dimension you want to see it in. The org chart, first and foremost, gives you just a picture of what your cloud presence looks like, right? This ability to understand how much presence you have in AWS versus Azure versus Google. It allows you to define how you want to set this up from, again, a policy, a spend roll up, as well as a permissions perspective, really aligned a lot more to how your organization does business, right? Or how your organization is aligned. A lot of times looks like an HR org chart. And so today, if you're using any of the native services like AWS organizations or Azure management groups or things like that, those are very much sort of a more technical view, right? Maybe it's around data classification. This is much more of sort of that business lens of your cloud presence. And then from here, this is really where we're going to align everything. So it doesn't matter what management account, tenant, et cetera, we're grabbing the data from. We begin to sort of normalize it all around this particular organizational structure. What we're looking at here on our policy view is this concept that we call cloud rules. Cloud rules is a native Kion concept, but is made up of policies and scripts and things that you're already using, right? So things like on the AWS side, cloud formation templates to set up and deploy infrastructure, maybe IAM policies or service control policies that you're using to set up region restrictions or instance restrictions. Same thing, right, on the Azure side with ARM templates and role definitions, as well as even like Google IAM roles, right? And we'll dig into these a bit here as we go through. So what we have here is a cloud rule that we put at the top of our organization. And so typically we like to call these sort of the non-negotiables, something that your security team might have set that says, listen, every account, every project, every subscription, resource group, whichever clouds you're using, everything has to abide by these particular rules, right? So we have here our company A baseline. So again, that's going to put in what services, instance types, actions we want to potentially allow or block across the entire enterprise. We also have the ability here where we're sharing out our golden AMI. So we want every AWS account in our organization or in other organizations to ensure that they're running, on one of the AMIs that our IT team is putting out. As well as what we have here is a region restriction. So we're saying as long as you compute inside the US for AWS and Azure, the security team is happy, right? And as we can see here, these cloud rules are multi-cloud, so they're affecting more than just one provider, or again, will span across organizations. But these rules will inherit their way down the organization, and then we begin to tailor them, right? When we get into research and development, we've inherited those rules. We've added on a first bit of compliance around CMMC. We've added a backup and snapshot policy. And we just continue seeing that we're layering on policy as we make our way further and further down the org chart. And where this is really important, is not just that you can have a predictable baseline of existing accounts. It's really around that idea of securing a new account by default. So Kion has that ability to programmatically create new AWS accounts, GovCloud accounts, new subscriptions, resource groups, Google Cloud projects, right? And just by aligning that within the hierarchy of where that new workload is going to live or where it's aligned, we're going to immediately set up all of those rules, all of those policies, all of that access, as well as even the budget that we haven't talked about yet, will all be aligned just by placing it within this hierarchy, right? So it becomes this way to really scale and grow, knowing that before anybody's ever logged in, your account is secure by default, right? And that's a big piece of what Kion is working toward. We see here, though, that we've inherited all of those cloud rules, and then we make our way down into a traditional sort of application, right? So here we have our Asthma research application. We've inherited all of those rules from above. We've set up a very specific type of account in this particular area. Biomedical research, that is. We've shared out some infrastructure there. And then we break down into like your traditional SDLC environments. I've got my dev account and my prod account, my staging and my tools, where we've actually added on even additional layers of things, like this ability to say, integrate with Tenable for host level vulnerability findings, or put in some cost restrictions, again, from a preventative perspective, to restrict my developers from standing up any instances that cost more than $2 an hour in this account, for example. And so these cloud rules are really, again, those guardrails that infrastructure and can even be, as you can see, your first bit of cost control. Spanning into cost a little bit, Kion goes beyond your traditional just spend reporting, right? Of telling you how much you've spent across these clouds. What we also have is this really powerful budgeting model and budgeting engine where you actually can align your cloud spend back to your internal cost centers, funding sources, budget centers, whatever your organization calls them, that's going to fund that particular workload. So it makes it really easy, at the end of the month to figure out which budgets you need to pull from in order to pay that AWS bill or that Azure subscription bill or whatever it may be. But it also allows you to get that business context to understand how you're spending over a given period, right? Whether I want to see it this quarter, I want to break it down by this calendar year, or even some custom amount where I can see that while for the quarter, the tools account, for example, was performing well, annually, I'm well over my budget, right? And ideally would have done something about this, ideally using Kion, which I'll show you here in a second. So if I start to dig into, say, a particular project, right, everything we've been looking at has been across the application. I'm logged in as an administrator, and so in turn, I can access everything. But Kion, again, I mentioned, is around visibility. And so this is the point at which if I were, say, just an application owner, or maybe I owned a few applications and therefore I was granted access at an OU, I now get the same bit of information in the context of what I can control and what I care about. So, for example, we see here, in this Azure research production environment, I can see when it was created, how long this project has been around, what it's for. We have this concept of labels that are key value pairs that you can use for really any kind of metadata about what's here, right? Data classification, user types, what standards we might be applying. It's up to you. There's no limit to how many those can be. We will go out there and actually pull an inventory of all the resources that are running in this environment. From that, we actually can grab all the data about those particular resources, what AMI they're on, right, what their IP addresses are, be able to search across tag values, see how much it's costing me if I have any opportunity to save money on it, as well as whether or not these particular instances have any like compliance findings against them, which we can see that we have here. So again, it gives you context to be able to start taking control of what's running in this project, and ideally have both a compliance environment from a security perspective as well as from a financial perspective. So as I mentioned, we also will, of course, do all of the spend reporting that you would expect. So here's where we're pulling in sort of those actual financials from the cloud providers and beginning to break those down in really, a number of different ways that you might be interested. Maybe I want to look in this case at a spend by service view for the whole year across this environment. Here I can see that, my spend has been going down in here. But I'm also able to notice that while I've got spend from AWS, I also have some spend coming from, say, Google Cloud SQL, Azure Application Gateway. And so I don't have to go to 3 different consoles, 3 different portals to begin to get this information. I have it all aggregated in one single place in Kion. I can add a bunch of filters where maybe I want to filter it down to where a tag, has a certain value or it doesn't have a certain value. Maybe I want to combine that with some of those labels in Kion where, I want to understand where the marketing business is spending, for example. I, of course, can do that. Or I can just drill down even further into any of the spend and get a real breakdown. So in my case, looking at this $1,200 or $1,100 in EC2, how much of that was on instances versus volumes versus gateways, right? How many instances was I running and how many hours all the way down into like the actual resource IDs, as well as the rate in which I'm being billed for those resources. And so I can get a really nice grasp of how is my spend, actually being broken down, and where might I want to make some architectural changes to not spend, $420 on NAT gateways, for example, in this given month. In addition to all that spend breakdown, though, this is now where we get into this idea of budgeting. And so again, this is this idea where now we can align different funding sources, right? Or those, again, different cost centers that are going to pay for this particular workload. And in turn, we can actually choose like an order, right? So I want to say, pull from my modernization budget before I go into my fiscal year budget, since this is a 6-year fund, for example. I can easily set that up within Kion. From that, I can determine how much money I want to pull from each budget, or do I want to pull everything from one and then another, for example. And so again, this is giving you that business context so that when I actually look at, say, an overall funding source like that modernization budget, I can now see exactly how I'm burning down against it, how much I budgeted against it, all the different projects that are pulling from there, whether or not they're on track or overspending. And again, once I have all that context, now I can actually begin to take some action against that. And that's where financial enforcements come in. This is our ability to go in and set, a spend and a trigger. So based on my monthly spend being greater than a certain amount, or maybe a certain percentage of my budget, maybe I only have a certain percentage of my budget remaining. Not only do I want to send out, notification to my developers, but this is where things can get really powerful again, is that ability to take action on the spend. So being able to freeze out my developers from standing up anything new, or again, this is where that restrict Azure VM SKUs and AWS EC2 instances came from, to start putting in some cost control, or even shutting down resources, right? All of that can happen through this concept of enforcements. And then lastly, of course, we're going to go out there and find ways in which you can save money in your cloud, from sort of, two different types: from decommissioning opportunities, where we're going out and making recommendations to remove that cloud resource that's not being used at all, to right-sizing opportunities, where we're making recommendations to downsize or downscale particular volumes or instances or whatever they may be, to save money based upon utilization. So moving on a little bit into cloud rules and compliance. So cloud rules, again, are the way in which we're putting in those preventative guardrails. When we think of compliance here at Kion, sorry about that. We think of compliance here at Kion. We really think of it in sort of the full security. Okay, that's not loading all of a sudden. Sorry. I'll pull that slide back up when I get there, but we think of it in terms of like the full security controls matrix, right? And so, or the full security lifecycle. And so, what I mean by that is, we have preventative controls all the way through detect, report, and remediation. And so, within cloud rules, these are your preventative controls. We want to ensure that you're not using services that aren't compliant with a particular framework. We're using we want to block certain regions, right? Certain instance types. We want to take a preventative measure to ensure that folks can't do anything. In addition to that, though, we have a whole compliance engine that's going out there and doing all of our detective, reporting, and remediation controls. With that, we actually align this to a number of popular frameworks, as you can see here. And when we do that, we actually pull up and can show that not only do we give you all the information about it, we actually give you the full security controls matrix around how exactly we're helping you meet this particular framework. So in this case, we've got NIST 853, right? Low baseline in this case, or moderate, whatever. I can come in here and see, on a security controls matrix basis, what is every jumpstart resource or compliance check, CloudFormation template, et cetera, that Kion is giving me to ensure that I have all of my compliance in place, how I'm meeting that particular control within that control family, as well as an example response that I can use. And so how that sort of manifests into, say, the user experience of Kion, right, is that Kion is what we like to often call the front door to the cloud. So again, it's hosted in your environment, it's branded, it's on your URL, right? It's your system. In that, Kion interacts and integrates with all of your identity providers, right? Whether that's talking through SAML or LDAP, OpenID, whatever it may be. When a user logs in, so I'm going to log in here as one of my developers, right? Isabella Infrastructure. When a user logs into this environment now, first and foremost, we pulled, in this case, all of Isabella's entitlements from upstream Azure Active Directory, which is fed from Active Directory itself, for example. And in there, we've determined what Isabella can do inside of Kion, right? What she has access to from an org structure perspective. So again, this hierarchy allows you to align permissions in the app. But more importantly, what it also allows us to do is create quick and easy access into the actual cloud providers. So from one place, I can federate again across AWS orgs, across AWS partitions. I also can federate natively into the Azure portal, for example, get direct access to the subscription that I was granted and at the role and level that I was granted that, as well as into, say, a Google Cloud project as well. In that, all of these permissions that she has to get in were fully granted, fully managed, and fully governed by what Kion is doing, right? So within here, we see that, again, EC2, a very popular service that everyone pretty much uses in the cloud. Within there, when Isabella goes there, she's able to get there with no problem, right? We're able to see that she has exactly what she needs. She's got her instances running and everything. She could make a new instance. However, when she starts to go outside of those organizational guardrails or those cloud rules that I talked about before, we can see that she's being restricted, right? So now, for example, if she tries to compute in Canada, there was that restrict non-US region cloud rule in place that prevents her from doing so. And so in a perfect world, preventative controls stop you from ever going out of compliance. However, you do need that continuous compliance piece because of ongoing auditors or that idea to validate that the preventative policy that you put in place is in fact actually working, right? And so that's again where the compliance piece comes into. And so when I log back in as, say, somebody that has elevated access and can see this, say, across my my organization, I'm able to see now that, if I go to my global compliance view, here's exactly what's happening sort of across my environment. I could see how many standards I'm being governed by, right? How many checks are out there, how many findings I have broken down by severity, and what that trend looks like as well. I can begin to dig in, say, on a particular standard basis, right? I want to come in here and understand, okay, of all the compliance standards, which one am I non-compliant with? Here I can see that there's a number of them, but if I were to dig into something like, okay, NIST 853 Rev 4 low, here I can actually see the resources themselves that are non-compliant, as well as we can see that, as of 5 minutes ago, for example, we found that this load balancer has cross-zone load balancing disabled, which is a violation of NIST 853, right? Or I have a KMS key that has cross-account access tied to it. Within each of these, I actually can come in here, here's a bucket that's inside of my account where public block is disabled, right, on my S3 bucket. If I look at a particular check, not only am I able to understand exactly what's going on, how many, overall buckets, I've considered this a high, I have 22 buckets out there that do not have public block enabled. And in turn, I get all that information about what they are. Again, I can federate quickly and easily to do something about it. I also have this ability to actually accept a particular risk, right? This stores my public assets. And so that's why I don't have that. I also can suppress it for a period of time. So I want to accept the risk just for the next 30 days. After that, I should be getting rid of my bucket. Kion does also have a SecOps sort of approval workflow in here. So you see today I'm an administrator, so I can go in and I can suppress this. However, I also can set up a suppression request workflow. So I could allow my end users, right? I can sort of democratize this idea of securing my environment, not just with the security team, but with everybody responsible for it, right? The actual application owners that know that if they put a public block on this S3 bucket, that's going to restrict, what the purpose of their application is or whatever. I can have them request suppression and go through an approval process in order to accept that. And so that is sort of the detection. We've now looked at the reporting side. And then ultimately on a policy by policy basis, this is where we get into remediation. And this is where we get to decide what to do about it. So first and foremost, we're calling a webhook back to ourselves to say, hey, we found this finding, right? Report it back. We do also have this ability to set public block to on just by simply uncommenting line 26 here. And so that is a really powerful thing, again, to go beyond just your traditional, you know, noise generation tools out there and actually do something about that. And so across the board, we've got over 8,000 different compliance checks that come out of the box within Kion, aligned to a number of different frameworks out there. And so with that, just want to make sure that I leave some time for any other questions or anything like that that folks may have. So coming back to this, just want to see if there are any questions. I saw a couple come into the chat here, but now would be the time if you have any additional ones. Again, in your sort of Zoom bar, you should have a Q&A that you can add additional ones in here. But let me start with some of the ones that we've currently got. So it looks like there was a question. What are the options for installing Kion? Great question. So again, I mentioned that Kion is self-hosted. So Kion actually leverages Aurora RDS MySQL on the back end, so standing up that service. And then on the front end, we can handle or leverage EC2 installers or ECS Fargate. The entire application is containerized. It's super quick and easy to install. Takes about 20 minutes to actually get a functioning Kion up and running. It's one CloudFormation template that we update. And again, you only need one Kion instance across all the cloud providers. So you don't need to install one in AWS and one in Azure or anything like that. So thanks for the question there. I will move on to the next question as well. So think I covered it, but I missed it initially. What compliance frameworks does Kion support? I showed you that list in in all those security controls matrices, but all the popular ones you can think of: NIST 800, 171, 53, CIS, CMMC, FedRAMP, PCI, HIPAA, and a number of others as well. All of that can be found on our support site, and we are always adding more based off of sort of new customer requests. So if there's one that you're looking for, we are happy to chat through that. And then lastly, it looks like we have a question on what other tools do you integrate with, and do you have an API? So yeah, actually, Kion itself is 100% API driven. We have a public API spec using Swagger for those that are familiar with that. It's got over 350 endpoints in there. But again, every piece of data, every button you click, everything that you see is capable of being accessed or manipulated via API. So that is really great for those automated workflows. We have a number of integrations on the compliance side. One of our newest integrations that I'm not sure if folks happen to see. Last week, we introduced an integration with a company called Cloud Storage Security. One of the great things about them is that they do essentially malware and data scanning inside of storage volume, so inside of S3 and EBS and EFS. And so for those familiar with like the shared responsibility model in the cloud, right, that is a layer that is definitely the customer's responsibility. And they're a great solution for that. And so our integration actually allows you to use them for scanning, bring in all those findings again into Kion so that you have that holistic view. Similarly, on the host level vulnerability finding, right? So scanning for unpatched Linux packages and things like that on your EC2 instances. We do have an integration with Tenable, as well as a number of other things from identity providers like Okta and OneLogin and Azure AD, all the way through to workflow tools like Jira and ServiceNow and things like that. So happy to talk through that as well. So that was the last question that I see here in the pod. And so just next steps, if you're interested, obviously happy to give a deeper dive demonstration for you and your team. But more importantly, we also do offer a free 30-day guided evaluation. So myself, my team, we help you get up and running with the platform. We bring your accounts in, we let you install it, kick the tires. It's a full function application to really prove, and put our money where our mouth is, essentially, of what the platform can do and how we can solve your challenges. So if you're interested, we'd love to chat more about that. And I will actually throw a link here in the chat for everybody as well, if you are interested in more information there. So with that, thank you very much for joining. Looks like a quick response here to a question around pricing. Our pricing is consumption based. It's around the size of the accounts that you're managing inside of Kion. But obviously, of course, we'd love to chat with you a little bit more and get an understanding of what your cloud presence looks like. So please reach out. I just threw the chat in or the link in the chat for more information. But otherwise, really appreciate everybody reaching out today. So thanks so much.